At dawn on September 18, 1944, on the coral island of Peleliu, a 19-year-old Marine lay pinned to the ground, watching men die every time they tried to move. 12 Japanese concrete pillboxes controlled the terrain, their machine guns overlapping every approach. Tanks couldn't reach them. Artillery would kill the Marines first. To cross the open ground meant seconds of exposure and near-certain death. Orders offered no solution. So Arthur Jackson made a decision no one expected. Without backup, without permission, he rose from cover, loaded his rifle, and ran straight toward the bunker that had already slaughtered his platoon. By 7:30 a.m. on September 18, 1944, the southern edge of Peleliu had become a killing ground. Private First Class Arthur Jackson, just 19 years old, hugged the coral terrain as Japanese machine gun fire shredded the Marines advancing beside him. He had been on the island for only 3 days. He had not fired a single confirmed killing shot. Ahead of the Marines stood 12 reinforced concrete pillboxes, carved into the coral in a crescent formation, each packed with Japanese defenders. When the 1st Marine Division landed days earlier, commanders believed Peleliu would fall within a long weekend. Instead, they had stepped into a battle that would grind on for more than 2 brutal months. The bloodshed began the moment the Marines hit the beaches. On the first day alone, American losses climbed into the thousands. But this battle was different. The Japanese no longer relied on mass charges or reckless assaults. Under Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, Peleliu had been transformed into a fortress. Nearly 10,000 defenders disappeared into caves and reinforced bunkers, linked by an underground tunnel system that stretched for hundreds of yards. They waited in silence, allowing the Marines to advance into carefully prepared kill zones. By September 18th, one Marine regiment had suffered catastrophic losses, more than 2/3 of its men killed or wounded. Jackson's unit, the 7th Marines, was now driving into the southern sector, assigned a mission that sounded simple on paper but proved deadly in reality. The objective was direct: break through the Japanese defenses and open the route to the airfield. What stood in the way were the pillboxes. Japanese engineers had fused them into the coral ridgelines, their reinforced walls thick enough to absorb almost anything the Marines threw at them. Each position was designed to protect the next, creating interlocking zones of fire that punished any frontal assault. When Marines targeted one bunker, others raked them from the sides. Grenades proved useless. Rifle fire only shattered against concrete. Attempts to storm the firing slits ended in bodies scattered across the coral. That morning, Jackson's platoon clawed forward barely 200 yards before the attack stalled. One massive bunker now dominated the approach, and nothing could move past it. The moment a Marine shifted position, the bunker responded with gunfire. The platoon was frozen in place, unable to push forward, unable to pull back. 3 men were already dead, cut down while searching for a way around the position. Normally, this was the point where tanks or artillery solved the problem. On Peleliu, neither was possible. The coral ridges were too steep, the avenues of approach too narrow. Any artillery strike would land on the Marines trapped in front of the bunker. There was only one remaining option. Someone would have to cross nearly 150 yards of exposed ground, reach the fortification, and destroy it at point-blank range, fully visible to defenders armed with machine guns, rifles, and grenades. The odds were unforgiving. Under fire, a man could sprint only so fast. Covering open ground meant seconds of full exposure. At that distance, the defenders' Type 92 machine guns could flood the approach with dozens of rounds before anyone reached the bunker. And there was more than one gun waiting. No Marine believed a man could make that run and survive it. The officers understood the risk. The sergeants understood it. Jackson understood it too. But he also saw the cost of doing nothing. Every minute the platoon remained pinned down meant more casualties. If the left flank failed to move, the entire attack would stall. Waiting for a perfect solution was simply another way to die. Jackson didn't hesitate. He loaded his Browning automatic rifle with a fresh magazine, jammed as many grenades as his pockets would hold, and stared across the 150 yards of open coral separating him from 35 Japanese soldiers. The sun beat mercilessly overhead, the temperature climbing past 100 degrees. 19 years old, he made a choice that seemed impossible. No orders, no support, no backup on his right. Every instinct told him to wait, but Jackson knew inaction would cost lives. Standing alone, he rose and prepared to cross the kill zone. Without hesitation, Jackson sprang to his feet and charged. The Browning automatic rifle, weighing nearly 20 pounds fully loaded, bounced at his hip as he ran across the open coral. The weapon roared, its .30 caliber rounds tearing into the air, not with precision, but with sheer volume, enough to keep the gunners' heads down. The Japanese spotted him instantly. Type 92 machine guns swiveled, spitting fire inches from his body. Bullets cracked overhead, coral chips sprayed at his feet, and the roar of automatic fire filled the air. Jackson didn't pause. He returned fire, every shot a defiant answer to the impossible odds. Jackson kept the bar's trigger pressed, sweeping the muzzle across the pillbox's firing slit. The concrete was impervious, but the hail of bullets forced the gunners to duck, buying him the precious seconds he needed. Step by step, he closed the distance. 100 yards, 80, 60. His magazine emptied. Dropping behind a jagged coral boulder, he slammed in a fresh one and surged forward again. The Japanese had recovered, their fire intensifying. Bullets kicked up coral dust at his boots. 40 yards, 30, 20. Every step a gamble with death. At point-blank range, the bunker's design turned against its own defenders. The narrow firing slits that once dominated the battlefield now restricted their ability to aim. Jackson slipped into the blind spot beside the main opening. The soldiers inside could hear his boots on the coral, but they couldn't bring their guns to bear. He hadn't crossed that open ground with bullets alone. Jackson carried grenades meant for close killing, fragmentation charges, and white phosphorus. And behind him, another Marine arrived carrying something far more destructive, 40 pounds of plastic explosive. White phosphorus ignited instantly on contact with air, burning with a heat no water could smother. Jackson pulled the pin on his first phosphorus grenade and shoved it through the firing slit. The screaming started immediately. Japanese soldiers stumbled out of the pillbox with their uniforms on fire. Their ammunition belts began cooking off, bullets exploding around their waists. Jackson shot them as they emerged. His bar cut them down before they could raise their weapons. But 35 men occupied that pillbox. Phosphorus alone would not kill them all. Some had retreated deeper into the structure. Some were already returning fire through secondary apertures. Jackson grabbed the explosive charges. 40 pounds of composition C2 plastic explosive. Jackson had only 30 seconds on the fuse. One chance. He shoved the explosive through the main firing slit and sprinted to safety. Diving into a nearby shell crater, he curled into a protective ball, pressing himself against the coral. Moments later, the bunker erupted. Concrete and timber soared into the sky, the ground shuddered beneath him, and debris rained around his position. A massive chunk of concrete landed mere inches from his head. When the dust cleared, the pillbox was obliterated. 35 Japanese defenders had been neutralized. Jackson rose to his feet, ears ringing, hands trembling, but alive. 200 yards ahead, 11 more pillboxes continued to rain fire down on the Marine lines. The sensible choice would have been to fall back, report the success, and let reinforcements deal with the remaining bunkers. But Jackson ignored logic. He reloaded his bar, checked the grenades he still carried, and moved toward the next target. The second pillbox, smaller than the first, held 5 Japanese soldiers and 2 machine guns trained on the approach. The element of surprise was gone. Across the line, defenders had seen the largest bunker vanish in a cloud of smoke. and now they knew an American was coming. Jackson turned the terrain into his ally. Peleliu's jagged coral ridges carved natural channels between the bunkers, allowing a skilled observer to move from cover to cover, avoiding multiple fields of fire. He had spent 3 days studying the Japanese defensive network, memorizing every blind spot. Approaching the second pillbox from its eastern flank, he crawled the final 30 yards along his belly, dragging the bar over volcanic rock. Inside, the defenders heard him but could not see him. Grenades arced blindly over the bunker wall, their short fuses hissing through the air. Jackson timed his movements carefully, waiting for the pause before surging forward again. Jackson reached the bunker wall and flattened himself against the concrete. His white phosphorus grenades were gone, spent in the first assault, but he still carried fragmentation grenades and his bar. From the earlier fight, he had learned something critical. Japanese pillboxes were vented through narrow shafts in the roof, designed to clear smoke from sustained fire. The openings were too small for explosives, but wide enough for a rifle barrel. Jackson climbed onto the bunker roof, located the vent, and forced the bar's muzzle inside. He emptied a full magazine into the confined space below. The shots ricocheted through the concrete interior. He reloaded and fired again. When he dropped back down, the bunker had fallen silent. 20 more rounds into the darkness, and when Jackson dropped back to the ground, the bunker was silent. 2 pillboxes down, 10 remained. The third and fourth sat dangerously close, their fields of fire overlapping. Each could target anyone attempting the other. Classic Japanese defensive design. Jackson couldn't assault one without being cut down by the other. But he had noticed something. Geometry worked in his favor. Both bunkers faced southwest toward the Marine lines, their firing slits covering a 120-degree arc. Between them, a narrow corridor, just 8 feet wide, lay in dead space, a gap neither bunker could reach. Any man crossing that corridor had to run perfectly straight. One misstep and bullets would rip from either side. Jackson sprinted through without hesitation. He reached the third bunker before its defenders could react, jammed his bar into the firing slit, and emptied the magazine. His last fragmentation grenade followed, blasting the interior. Without pause, he surged to the fourth bunker and repeated the assault. 4 pillboxes obliterated. Roughly 55 Japanese soldiers were neutralized in under 20 minutes. His ammunition was dwindling. The bar had jammed twice from overheating, and the barrel was so hot it seared his hands through the wooden grip. But Jackson kept moving. Grenades were gone. Explosives were spent. Any reasonable man would have stopped, fallen back, and resupplied. But Jackson had noticed something amid the smoke and dust. Marines from his platoon were finally moving forward. His assault was opening the path. If he stopped now, the remaining 8 pillboxes would pin them down, just as his platoon had been trapped earlier. More lives would be lost. He checked his remaining ammunition, made a quick decision, and prepared to press the attack, knowing the next moves could change everything. 3 magazines, 60 rounds. 8 pillboxes still stood between Jackson and the southern perimeter. The odds no longer made sense, but he moved anyway. The 5th bunker was different. Larger than the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, it had something the others lacked: a rear entrance. Japanese engineers had adapted to American tactics, building tunnels that linked bunkers to rear trenches. Attack one side, and defenders could slip through, reposition, and strike back. Jackson had no idea this tunnel existed. Jackson approached the 5th bunker using the same method that had carried him through the others. Locate the blind spot, close the distance, and take out anyone inside. Pressing himself against the concrete wall, he prepared to climb onto the roof and find the ventilation shaft. Then, from behind, a soldier emerged, just 5 yards away, camouflaged beneath coral rocks and palm fronds. Bayonet fixed, rifle poised, he lunged at Jackson. Instinctively, Jackson spun and fired from the hip. His bar's .30 caliber round struck true. The soldier collapsed back into the tunnel, but the sound had alerted everyone inside. Shouts echoed from inside the bunker, boots scrambling across concrete. Jackson had only seconds before more defenders could pour through the tunnel. Dropping to one knee, he fired into the narrow entrance, his rounds channeled perfectly by the confined passage. Every bullet struck with deadly precision. In 4 seconds, he emptied an entire magazine, slammed in his penultimate one, and kept firing. When the gunfire finally ceased, 3 defenders lay neutralized. The 5th pillbox was silent. 5 down, 7 still active. But now, everything had changed. The remaining Japanese positions had identified him, knew his tactics, and had radios. Colonel Nakagawa had built a command network across the southern perimeter. Each bunker could instantly relay information to the others. From the command post, the Japanese could coordinate counterattacks, redirect fire, and send reinforcements. Jackson had no idea. He didn't know runners were moving through the tunnel network. He didn't know Nakagawa's officers had identified the lone American dismantling their southern perimeter. He didn't know the remaining 7 pillboxes were ordered to concentrate their fire on him. What he didn't know was simple. Marines were advancing on his right. He could hear rifles and the shouts of sergeants. His attack had shattered the defensive line. The Japanese were no longer in control. They were reacting, scrambling, forced onto the back foot. The 6th pillbox loomed on elevated ground, perched atop a coral ridge 15 feet higher than the surrounding terrain. From this vantage, the defenders could spot Jackson approaching from over 200 yards away. There was no blind spot, no stealthy approach. Their sightlines covered every angle. Jackson had only 1 magazine left, 20 rounds. Then, a Marine rifle squad appeared on his right, 6 men moving through the gap he had created. Their sergeant assessed the situation. Jackson crouched behind a coral boulder, the elevated bunker, the impossible geometry. Without issuing orders or coordinating, he simply pointed and led his men forward. Jackson and 6 Marines attacked at the same moment, splitting the enemy's attention from 2 directions. The Japanese gunners were forced to choose. They concentrated their fire on the larger threat, the advancing rifle squad. That decision gave Jackson his opening. He scaled the coral ridge from the bunker's blind side, moving fast while the defenders were distracted. Reaching the roof, he located the ventilation shaft and drove the muzzle of his bar into the opening. 20 rounds. His final magazine. He fired deliberately, every shot placed with purpose. The 6th pillbox went silent. The rifle squad had paid a price, 2 wounded, 1 dead, but they were still advancing. Jackson lowered his now empty weapon and looked ahead. 6 pillboxes remained. He needed ammunition. He needed grenades. And for the first time since the assault began, he needed help. For the first time since his assault began, Jackson was not alone. But the Japanese response arrived within minutes. Colonel Nakagawa's command post had tracked the destruction of 6 defensive positions in under half an hour. 1 American had taken out roughly 60 soldiers. The southern perimeter was unraveling. Nakagawa faced a dilemma. His defensive doctrine relied on interlocking fields of fire, each pillbox protecting its neighbor. Take out 1, and the network weakens. Take out 6, and gaps opened wide enough for an entire Marine platoon to exploit. He ordered a counterattack. 40 soldiers from his reserve company were dispatched. Their mission simple: seal the breach. Seal the breach. Eliminate the Marine responsible. Restore the line. That was the order. Jackson had no idea reinforcements were already moving. He was focused on survival, scavenging what he could from the battlefield. Arisaka rifles were everywhere, but their ammunition was useless to him. What mattered were the grenades. From the bodies around the 6th bunker, Jackson gathered 7 Type 97 fragmentation grenades and 2 Type 99 magnetic mines meant for tanks. He found no spare bar magazines. What he did find was an abandoned M1 Garand near the 3rd position. 8 rounds per clip, .30 caliber, the same ammunition his bar fired. Jackson broke the clips apart and hand-loaded individual rounds into his empty magazines. It was slow, improvised, but it would keep him fighting. It was slow, painstaking work, but Jackson now had 40 rounds, 2 full magazines. The rifle squad that had supported him at the 6th pillbox was regrouping. Their sergeant, wounded in the shoulder, remained functional, issuing orders through hand signals. The squad had taken heavy losses, 1 dead, 2 wounded, leaving just 3 Marines combat-ready. Jackson and the 3 remaining Marines readied themselves to assault the 7th pillbox when the Japanese counterattack struck. 40 soldiers emerged from a tunnel 200 yards to the north, moving in disciplined columns. No screams, no suicide charges, just trained infantry advancing steadily through the coral ridges with rifles at the ready. The Marines spotted them first. The barman fired, but after 3 rounds, the weapon jammed, fouled by coral dust. Jackson dropped behind cover and quickly cleared the jam. He stepped into the gap, bracing his bar against the coral outcrop. Controlled bursts, 5 rounds, pause. 5 more. Every bullet counted. There was no room for waste. The Japanese formation scattered, soldiers diving behind rocks while others pressed forward, trying to close the distance. Their gunfire intensified, bullets cracking overhead, coral fragments spraying across Jackson's face. The 3 Marines beside him added their garrons to the fight, clips of 8 rounds each. The sharp ping of empty clips hitting the ground echoed through the chaos, a staccato rhythm of survival. Japanese soldiers fell, 10, 15, but more kept coming. They had the numbers. They had discipline. And they had orders to retake this ground at any cost. Jackson's first magazine emptied. He slammed in his last 20 rounds. The Marines were down to their final clips. The squad's barman had cleared his jam, but had only 1 magazine left. The odds had turned against them. For Americans, roughly 60 rounds, facing 25 disciplined soldiers still advancing. Then, without warning, the coral ridge behind the Japanese erupted in explosions. The 7th Marines had pushed 3 rifle platoons through the gaps Jackson had carved. 40 men, armed with rifles, bars, and grenades, circled behind the Japanese counterattack. They had waited for the perfect moment, and that moment had arrived. The Japanese found themselves trapped between 2 American forces, Jackson and his 3 Marines in front, 40 more closing in from behind. The crossfire was merciless. Soldiers fell in clusters. Some tried to retreat toward their tunnel entrances, only to be cut down before reaching safety. In less than 3 minutes, the counterattack was finished. 40 Japanese soldiers lay dead on the coral. The southern perimeter's last reserve had been wiped out. 6 pillboxes still stood, but now Jackson had ammunition. He had grenades, and 40 Marines were ready to follow him into the final positions. Ahead, 300 yards away, the largest bunker complex on the southern peninsula loomed. 3 pillboxes, arranged in a triangle, mutually supporting and heavily manned, formed a nearly impregnable stronghold. The Japanese had concentrated their remaining defenders here, making it their last line. Jackson checked his weapon, counted his grenades, and looked at the Marines gathering around him. The final assault was about to begin, and this triangular fortress would be the hardest fight of all. 3 pillboxes, each covering the approaches to the others, formed a lethal triangle. Roughly 30 Japanese soldiers were spread among the bunkers, supported by a network of rifle pits and fighting holes linking the positions. Standard Marine doctrine would have called for a preparatory bombardment before assaulting such a fortified stronghold, naval gunfire, airstrikes, or at least a barrage from the regiment's mortars. None of that was available. The naval guns had moved on to support operations elsewhere. Marine corsairs were striking targets on the northern ridges, and the mortar teams could not fire without risking the Marines already advancing through the area. 43 Americans were about to take the triangular stronghold armed with rifles, grenades, and 1 man who had already proven that concrete walls were no match for his courage. Jackson organized the assault in under 2 minutes. using hand signals to point out targets and dividing the Marines into 3 groups. Each team would strike a single pillbox simultaneously. Jackson himself would lead the attack on the center bunker, the largest, the most fortified, with the widest fields of fire. At 8:47, the Marines moved out. They had been fighting for over an hour, and the temperature had climbed past 105 degrees. Dehydration was setting in. Several Marines showed signs of heat exhaustion, but they pressed on. Jackson led his group of 12 toward the center pillbox. The approach demanded crossing 60 yards of open volcanic rock, baked white under the Pacific sun. No cover, no concealment. Halfway across, Japanese fire erupted. 2 men went down in the first 3 seconds, 1 dead, 1 wounded in the leg. The remaining 10 pressed forward. They had learned from Jackson's previous assaults. Speed meant survival, hesitation meant death. Jackson reached the bunker first, pressed against the concrete, and pulled the pin on a Japanese grenade. The Type 97 grenades had a 4 to 5 second fuse. Jackson counted to 2, hurled 1 through the firing slit, and ducked. The explosion silenced 1 machine gun, but the bunker still had a second firing position. Marines outside were taking fire. Jackson pulled another grenade, counted again, and threw it. Another blast, and the second gun went quiet. He climbed to the roof, located the ventilation shaft, and shoved his bar inside, emptying the magazine into the darkness below. Screams echoed from within the concrete. And then, silence. The center pillbox was neutralized. To his left, the first assault group had reached their target, and a Marine corporal had shoved a satchel charge through the firing slit. The explosion tore through half of the center bunker's roof. Japanese survivors stumbled into the waiting rifle fire of the Marines. On Jackson's right, the third assault group struggled. Their target had a reinforced entrance facing away from the advancing Marines. Inside, Japanese soldiers hurled grenades faster than the Americans could close the distance. Jackson did not hesitate. He sprinted across the open coral between the bunkers. Bullets kicked up fragments around his feet. 1 grazed his thigh. He kept running, reached the third pillbox from its blind side, the same side the Marines could not approach, and located the ventilation shaft. He had only 2 grenades left. He dropped both grenades into the ventilation shaft. The explosions tore through the pillbox, killing everyone inside. In less than 4 minutes, 3 bunkers had fallen, and the triangle was destroyed. Jackson was bleeding. The bullet that grazed his thigh had cut deeper than he realized, and blood soaked his trousers. Each step made his left leg weaker, but he didn't stop. Ahead, the remaining 3 pillboxes still blocked the Marines from total control of the southern peninsula. Jackson had killed roughly 50 Japanese soldiers, destroyed 9 bunkers, and been wounded, yet he pressed on. The logical choice would have been to stop, get medical attention, and let fresh Marines finish the fight. Jackson loaded his last magazine and kept moving south. A Marine sergeant grabbed his arm, gesturing at the blood and the aid station behind them. Jackson wrenched free. 3 pillboxes remained. He was not finished. At 0912, the 10th bunker fell, its 5 defenders eliminated by grenades dropped through the ventilation shaft. His leg still bled, a torn strip of dungaree fabric barely slowing the flow. By 0921, the 11th pillbox was down, but this one required more help. Jackson's ammunition was gone. A Marine private named Henderson brought forward a satchel charge. Jackson set it carefully, and the explosion killed 7 Japanese soldiers. The 12th pillbox remained, the last. Perched on a small rise overlooking the beach where the 7th Marines had landed 3 days earlier, it had been firing on the Marine supply party since D-Day. Its 2 machine guns had already claimed at least 15 American lives. The bunker's commander had watched 11 pillboxes fall that morning. He knew his turn was coming. Jackson approached from the northeast, dragging a leg that no longer responded properly. Blood loss blurred his vision, and the coral ridges seemed to shimmer in the 100 degrees heat. 3 Marines followed him, ready for the final assault. Jackson's comrades refused to let him face the final pillbox alone. One carried extra grenades, another brought a flamethrower, and the third had a bar with spare ammunition. The Japanese opened fire at 100 yards. The bar gunner unleashed a suppressive burst, forcing the enemy to duck. Jackson and the others pressed forward. At 50 yards, the flamethrower operator stepped into position. The M2's effective range was only 40 yards. He had to get closer. Jackson covered him, taking the bar and firing controlled bursts. The weapon kicked hard against his shoulder, and his wounded leg buckled, but he dropped to one knee and continued firing. The flamethrower operator reached range and triggered a 3-second burst. Burning fuel arced through the air, pouring into the pillbox's firing slit. The screams lasted less than 10 seconds. By 09:33, the 12th pillbox fell silent. Jackson slumped against a coral boulder, his dungarees soaked with blood. His hands trembled from exhaustion and adrenaline. The bar lay across his lap, its barrel still hot from the final assault. In roughly 90 minutes, Private First Class Arthur Jackson had destroyed 12 Japanese pillboxes and killed 50 enemy soldiers. He had shattered the southern defensive line, enabled his platoon's advance, and altered the tactical situation across an entire sector of the island. A Navy corpsman reached him within minutes. Medics cut away his blood-soaked trousers and dressed the wound. The bullet had passed through muscle without striking bone or a major artery. Jackson would keep his leg, and he would keep fighting. 3 days later, still limping, he returned to combat. Word of his assault spread quickly through the 7th Marines. Officers observing from forward posts described the incredible scene. A single Marine charging positions that should have required a full company, pillboxes falling one after another, and roughly 50 Japanese soldiers killed. The regimental commander sent a detailed report to division headquarters, which in turn forwarded it to Corps Command. By the time Peleliu was declared secure on November 27th, Arthur Jackson's actions had reached the desk of Admiral Chester Nimitz. The Medal of Honor recommendation had been submitted in early October, detailing every pillbox, every kill, every critical moment of his 90-minute assault. The paperwork moved unusually quickly through the chain of command. On October 5, 1945, 13 months after Peleliu, President Harry Truman stood in the White House. The war had ended, Japan had surrendered, and now 20-year-old Arthur Jackson stood at attention as the president placed the Medal of Honor around his neck, reading the citation aloud for all to hear. 12 pillboxes destroyed. 50 Japanese soldiers were killed. Conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty. After the ceremony, Jackson returned to Oregon. He carried a Medal of Honor, a limp that would never fully heal, and memories that would haunt him for the rest of his life. For decades, the hero of Peleliu remained silent about that day. He settled in Portland, married, raised a family, and delivered mail for the United States Postal Service. His neighbors saw a quiet man with a slight limp, unaware of the medals hidden in his closet. Jackson stayed in the military reserves, transferring from the Marine Corps to the Army Reserve, continuing service through the Korean War era. He rose to the rank of captain, mentoring younger soldiers while keeping the story of Peleliu locked away. In 1961, Jackson was stationed at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base in Cuba. Cold War tensions ran high, and the island was a hotspot for espionage and Soviet influence. As a security officer, Jackson monitored potential threats closely. On September 30th, a Cuban worker named Ruben Sabargo, already under suspicion of passing intelligence to hostile forces, confronted him. The encounter turned violent. Acting in self-defense, Jackson shot and killed Sabargo. He reported the incident to his superiors, though the situation remained complicated and tense. The incident became entangled in Cold War politics. Jackson requested a court-martial to officially clear his name, but the Marine Corps denied him. In 1962, he left active service, though the events lingered in his mind for years. He had killed 50 men on Peleliu and earned the Medal of Honor, yet a single life at Guantanamo brought only silence. Time, however, gave perspective. Jackson continued his Army Reserve service until 1984, retiring as a captain with 40 years of combined service. He settled in Idaho, began speaking publicly, visiting schools and veterans groups, sharing lessons on courage, fear, and the cost of survival. In 2011, at 86, he returned to the USS Peleliu. The Navy had named an amphibious assault ship to honor the battle where Jackson had earned his Medal of Honor. He walked the decks, addressing over 1,000 sailors and Marines gathered in the hangar bay. He spoke of the 14-pound canned ham his mess sergeant had forced him to carry during the landing, of the relentless pillboxes, and of the comrades who never returned. At the ceremony, Jackson presented the ship's captain with his Medal of Honor flag, one of only 2 each recipient receives. The captain had it framed and placed it in the ship's Hall of Heroes, alongside photos of the 8 Marines who had earned the Medal of Honor at Peleliu. Arthur Jackson was the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from that battle. On June 14, 2017, he passed away in Boise, Idaho, at the age of 92. Marine Corps bodybearers from Bravo Company, Marine Barracks, Washington, honored him with full military rights at the Idaho State Veterans Cemetery. 50 Japanese soldiers had tried to stop a single 19-year-old Marine on September 18, 1944. Every one of them fell. The Marine lived another 73 years, carrying the weight of courage, sacrifice, and survival. If this story moved you the way it moved us, make sure to hit that like button and honor his legacy. Every single like tells YouTube to share this story with more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story from the forgotten corners of history. Every day, we bring to light incredible tales. Marines charging concrete bunkers with nothing but rifles and grenades. Ordinary men performing extraordinary acts of heroism. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or somewhere else? Our community spans the globe. You're not just a viewer, you're helping keep these memories alive. Share your location. Tell us if a family member served. Let us know you're here. Thank you for watching and for helping ensure Arthur Jackson and heroes like him are never forgotten.